Welcome back, everyone, to another Welcome to the J episode. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest. But before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe to the Field of 68 Media Network so you can get content such as this. Someone representing their alma mater talking basketball and everything in between. Today, season number 2 of the Welcome to the J podcast. He is our 13th guest of season 2. He is a sharpshooter extraordinaire. He is the definition of a Shooter U alum. He is a member of Team Liddy, J Lifer, BP's most wanted. Isaiah Zierden steps into the J with you. What up, brother?
Wow, that's quite the introduction.
That's quite the intro. Brooklyn Park's most wanted, bro.
Most wanted. Wow. I guess I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yo, I'm laughing so much because I already know what kind of day it's going to be today. Like, anytime you step into the pod with me, bro, it's a good time. You already know. Anytime I talk with you, it's a good time.
I had to get my public speech out. I made sure I gotta keep it PG. I'm so used to just letting it fly.
Well, the beautiful thing about having a podcast is, one, we can edit things if it gets a little too rowdy. And number two, this is not a PG podcast. I don't know if you've listened to the other one, but we're kind of allowed to do whatever you want here. Case in point. Cheers.
Yeah, lucky you.
Well, it is 10 o'clock at night as I'm recording this, and it's like, what, 3 p.m. or something like that over there where you are?
Yeah, literally 3:15.
Yeah, so a little early for you.
Well,
perfect
I gotta
time
catch up
for me.
We're on your time. I gotta catch up.
Oh, I guess you have to be on the host's time for real, I guess. How you been, bro? How you holding up?
Chilling, man. Chilling another day.
Trying to stay out of trouble. I know these Minnesota streets be crazy.
Oh, well, I guess I'm most wanted, so I guess I haven't really stayed out of trouble. I didn't even know, but trying to stay out of it.
It's unfortunate, but we do have to talk about this. You know, I hate to come on the podcast and remember some of the losses that we've had, but the boys played on Saturday on the road in Cincinnati versus Xavier. They lose 80-73. They turned the ball over 21 times, which, as we all know, is just a recipe for disaster. You know, this is one of those things that makes Coach Mac's head spin. What do you think this week has been like for Coach Mac and his staff, and what do you think they've been working on in practices leading up to the next game?
I'm not an expert, but I have been there, and I'm going to assume that the boys had a nice day the next day at practice, getting the legs loose and getting a few sprints in for every turnover. But no, I'm sure that they just worked on getting back to the fundamentals, which we always did when we had bad games where we had a bunch of turnovers. Just, you got to take care of the basketball. You got to value the ball. And, obviously it's not like they're trying to turn the ball over, but, Cincinnati, Xavier's a tough place. So it's always, the crowd's right there on you. And so I'm sure that Mac had a very pointed talk with them the next day, and I'm sure that they'll be better.
I can only imagine the film session. Like, when I was watching the game on Saturday, I was like, man, there's a lot of stuff out here that Coach Mac is really going to harp on these guys about. I know that you and I were both in those guys' shoes. So what do you remember from those moments?
Going into the film session, you're like just thinking back and you're remembering all the times that you screwed up, and you're like, oh man, this is going to be a nice film session for me.
I remember I used to I knew exactly when I messed up at during the game, and I would kind of look at the game clock in film and pray to God that he would skip over.
Nah, I wouldn't do that. My mistake. I know going back, I'd be like, oh no, that's wild. Looking at a turnover, running back, looking at the clock, all right, 6:30. Okay.
That's it, bro. That's exactly what I did. I would I'd look at the clock and be like, 16 minutes. Okay, that was a bad one. Okay, let's see. So when we got to film and he'd go from 17 to 14, I was like, oh, he skipped line. He didn't remember.
The only time I looked is if it's like getting close to a media timeout, and I'd be like, okay, now I have to hear that in timeout. But if it was like right after, I'd be like, okay, I'm good unless he subs me out, then I'll have to hear it. But I can get a couple minutes in before he says anything.
I'll be honest, I'd much rather have heard the wrath of Coach Mack during the media timeout than to point it back again on film the next day. Like if I ever had a choice between those two,
I don't think people understand how bad those film sessions are. Just like, obviously it's not like it's like over the top, but it's just the way you feel. You're like, I feel like a dumbass.
Yeah, and it's like not only is it that, but it's like you're obviously sitting there around your teammates who are also like getting the same visual. And when you are like, I don't like the guinea pig, let's say, like so to speak, because of a mistake of something that he wants to make sure that nobody else does, he will play it, he'll review it, he'll have the assistant coaches comment on it.
Yeah, and
he'll ask you what you did wrong there.
Right, going back and watching the film, you can pause it and look at it, and then he'll pause it and be like, what were you thinking? Well, I mean, yeah, well, you kind of make you look like a dumbass, but at the time.
Yeah, and it's so hard to remember what you were thinking at the time because I just remember some of my egregious mistakes. Like, why was I there? Like, why was I even in a position to make that mistake? But
you're just too taxed.
At 21, team tax, 21 turnovers. So that the guys had, like you just said, like for sure they talked about it, for sure got brought up in field sessions. And on the practice floor, Coach Mack is he's a stickler for making sure that things are done the right way. So I can only imagine the reps that they had to go through to try and limit those turnovers. No. And the crazy thing about turnovers is it has this weird snowball effect where like if you start off the game and like before the first media timeout, there's 1, 2, 3 turnovers already. You can best believe that, it takes a special team to be able to like cut that off after that first media timeout and right the ship. Unfortunately for us right now, we're still a young team that's learning to play together. So those turnovers just kept piling up as the game went on. And it's not the first time that we've seen the Jays go through that. So what do you think is the remedy here?
Well, I mean, you said it, it's a young team. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't have just one game of it. It'll be, multiple games. Now you try to limit those as much as you can, obviously, but a young team, they gotta kind of feel their way. They have to kind of build what we had that your senior year, where we just had the ability to, call a timeout and everyone sit down and be like, all right, let's just settle back in. And being a young team, they'll slowly pick up on that and start to learn what they can and can't do.
Do you remember what I used to say in those huddles and in those timeouts whenever things were going a little wrong?
Well, I mean, what didn't you say, but what specific?
I would always go back in and be like, guys, we've been here before.
I mean, that's always a given.
I feel a little bad for our listeners today because there's going to be so much laughing. I wonder if they're even going to like get anything out of this conversation. Aside from, I guess Jay and Isaiah are really good friends. They're really like the best of friends because there's just going to be too much laughter going on.
Well, they'll get some pieces of information in between, but then they'll get a joke or two that they just won't get.
The phrase, basketball is a game of runs. I think we've all heard that obviously in our careers. None was more evident in the game that we just saw on Saturday, where the Jays start off with Xavier going on 9-0 run against them. Then they fire off like a 17-2 run. And then the game is just, that's how it goes, like the entire game. Does it kind of feel like the game slept through our fingers this time around because, Xavier put that last run against us and we just didn't have enough time to answer it and to go on a run of our own?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It's more, you already touched on it. It's a young team. So it's not like they understand fully because they haven't been in many of these situations. And obviously they have, but not quite this certain situation. A lot of turnovers. They have to find a way to stop the bleeding and kind of go on their own run. And so, but you learn and you tip your cap to Xavier, and you just try to make sure that you don't turn the ball over the next time, or you try to stop their run and go on your own before, the time runs out on you.
The one thing that really stuck out at me was Xavier's bench outscored our bench 25-5. Now, you and I have both spent some time in our careers coming off the bench. What are some of the advice that you give to those guys who maybe don't quite understand the importance of their play just yet, to be able to maintain that good level of play, if not up that good level of play once they do have a chance to come onto the court?
Oh, you just got to tell them that they need to be ready. You never know, you might give 1 minute, for a couple games, and then all of a sudden you might come into a game like that and they need 20 minutes out of you, and you just have to be ready. And you got to bring energy and bring something different to the game that, whoever you're replacing isn't, or, just something different than what they're bringing. So for that game, obviously getting outscored like that, I mean, you gotta just come in with an energy, and not saying you got to come in and shoot every time you touch it, but just being aggressive and knowing what your team needs, and try to bring that spark off the bench.
Wait, are you saying you, Isaiah Zierden, are suggesting to not shoot the ball every time you touch it? I don't think I'd ever heard that from you.
I didn't say if you're open, shoot it. That's not what I'm saying. But I didn't say come in your first time touching the ball and shoot a 35-footer. That's not what I'm saying. Unless you're wide.
There it is. I knew there was a caveat there somewhere.
Unless you're wide open and in rhythm, then you got it.
The Isaiah that I remember, and Isaiah that I vividly remember walking around campus with a bunch of Kobe shirts and talking about Kobe mentality and all that stuff and mama mentality. I knew the first time you touched the ball, if you had a chance, it was going up for sure. That's the kind of confidence that you have. But I mean, I do understand your point of whoever you're coming in replacing, you have to pay attention really to the flow of the game, what's going on out there, so that when you step in, you can be, while everybody's zigging, you're that zag. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
not always scoring. Sometimes it's just coming in and getting a few defensive stops so that your team can get a little momentum and get on that run before to stop theirs and get on your own run before time runs out on you. But it's just little things each game. Maybe you're not defensive, you're solid, but you're not scoring. You're just being a facilitator. You just have to kind of feel the game out, and coming off the bench, you're able to kind of see how the game is going before you get to hop in. So you just got to be ready.
I know that one thing that I really focus on, in my career as a collegiate athlete and as a pro athlete as well, the times that I had to come off the bench, instead of focusing on my own individual numbers, I always focus on my plus minus, because that kind of gave me an idea of, what kind of impact I had while I was on. And, sometimes those numbers could be a little fluky for sure, but more often than not, it really kind of tells the story of while you were on the court, with the lineup that was around you, how well the team played. Do you think that maybe that's something that those guys, like you said, instead of maybe individual numbers, that's something that if they focus on that a little bit, it'll give them a different mindset about what kind of impact they can have on the floor?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's, that goes from being a statistics of your own to looking at the team. Now plus minus obviously can be always a little skewed, but for the most part, when you come in, it'll show what kind of an impact you had. Either you came off the bench not ready to play, and they ended up going on a run and you're a -10, and that's the last time you see the floor, or you make an impact, a positive impact, and you guys go on a run and you get to play more. So I mean, but again, that's just young kids. They're gonna learn throughout the course of their career what they need to do and what they can't do when they come in.
Before we move on to our next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up yet with BetRivers, now's the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today. or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call telephone number 1-800-GAMBLER. So despite his 5 turnovers, which is obviously really, really high, I was very impressed with Alex O'Connell in this one, 22.6 rebounds. We've seen that he's taken, the challenge of being the best defensive player out on the floor, defending the opposition's best offensive player, especially during Sharif's absence, where, those are kind of the role, that was the role that Sharif used to play. Alex has really stepped up into that role, and he's done the best job out of all of the Jays, in my opinion, so far. But obviously, it's nice to see his offense kind of catch up with his defense, so to speak. You and I both, at different points in our careers, had to play that role where we had to be the best defensive player on the court, or at the very least try our best. I know you're smirking over there, but at the very least, right? Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, that is a big part of it, is to have team concept and to understand positioning and to funnel guys in certain areas. If you weren't that shutdown, I don't consider myself being the, Sharif Mitchell, Kyrie Thomas. I don't consider myself to be that guy at all. But I did understand, where guys needed to go and where I needed to funnel them for our team defense to be successful. So as a guy who had that similar role, can you kind of explain to the audience out there how difficult it is to be in a 3-and-D or a guy that plays both sides of the floor in a Coach Mac offense?
Oh, I mean, you have to be in shape. There's no other way to put it. I mean, if you didn't think you needed to be in shape, just, with our pace of offense, you have no idea, having to guard the other team's best player or second best player and chase them off screens. And then, so, I mean, yeah, that's the number one thing. But number two is, I always tried to like watch the film and see what, obviously their plays, we tried to go over that, in practice, but just kind of watch like their tendencies and where they like to get a lot of their shots, so that I knew mentally, because I obviously wasn't the most athletic defender, I had to be, smarter and try to figure out different angles. And then obviously, like you said, try to force them to my help, know where my help is on certain plays. And if it's an ISO, try to force them back middle, or, whatever the situation was, then it becomes a team defensive situation.
I love that we're talking about this, because like it takes a lot of patience, one, to kind of understand what you are good at and what you're bad at defensively. Let's just put it that way. Like for me, like I was really good at chasing shooters around and all that stuff, and that might not be everybody's strength. What I sucked at, especially back then, was keeping guys in front of me, like in an ISO one-on-one situation. So those guys were always the toughest ones to guard. So I would kind of, lean over to Mac and be like, hey, can I switch my matchup? And, so there is, like for a guy like Alex, I think in the Nebraska game early on in the season, we saw that he was getting backdoored a lot because he was over aggressive on those shooters coming up high and trying to deny handoffs and whatnot. He's done such a much better job in these last handful of games of, making sure that his butt's to the baseline and he's funneling everything up the floor, as opposed to, getting caught on cheap backdoors and allowing the offensive player to get started that way. Because, as an offensive player, you just have to see the ball go in the bucket one time and you feel like you're the hottest man out there, right?
All right. Once you see it go in, then it's got to keep going up.
And I'm thankful that our coaching staff, like you mentioned, did bring some of us to their offices individually in order to watch a little bit more film, so we can understand tendencies and, what guys are struggling with and what they don't like. And it makes all that stuff a lot easier on game day. So giving you your flowers right now, Alex O'Connell, shouts out to you for, the defensive effort that you put up. And obviously, as Isaiah mentioned, you got to be in shape to be able to knock down those shots and to still be, a threat offensively. Anything else to say on it?
Well, I don't want to get him in trouble with Mac, but if he's listening or, tunes in, you're chasing somebody, just, make sure you're trailing on the outside, that you're there just enough to deny so they don't throw it. And then your job's done. Then you can kind of play help defense. But you didn't hear from me.
Yeah, no, the easiest part is not having him catch it. And that's something that, that's half the battle right there.
if you chase perfectly and you get your arm in there, they won't throw it, and then you play help.
We have some fans that tuned in knowing that you're going to be on the show today, ask some questions on Twitter. So we're going to turn it over to some of those questions. We have some really good, interesting questions this week. So I appreciate you guys who are always dropping questions for the guest on the Welcome to the J podcast. These questions are for you and I, Isaiah. So let's just try and go through them and see if we could provide a little bit of a few answers in the categories that we can. Steve at SLIOI 1017 on Twitter says, we'd love to hear your thoughts about something. No doubt Blue Jay men's basketball is trending upwards. Sweet 16, best recruiting class, future looking bright. NIL deals will also help attract players to Omaha. What will it take? And this is the question. What will it take for Creighton to become a Gonzaga type of program? He says, in my opinion, Omaha is better than Spokane. Our facilities are just as nice or better. Schools are very similar as far as what they offer. But what does Creighton need to do to become a legitimate contender year after year, talking about, Sweet 16, Elite 8, and beyond? So before I give my thoughts, you're the guest. I definitely have to give you first say on this. What do you think is missing for us to become one of those programs that year after year, we're always competing? Like the NCAA tournament, it's a done deal. We're going to be in it. Like, you know what I mean? Like those types of teams that he's talking about, like Gonzaga, they never have to worry about that per se. But like for us to make a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four type run, what is it that we're missing in Omaha?
You want my honest opinion, or
however you want to go with it? Honest, you can make a joke about it if you want, and go back to being honest.
No, I mean, the Big East is they're in the easy, one of the easiest conferences, and so it's like a cakewalk for them every year. Now, granted, they play some good teams early in the season, and they have to win those games. But even if they lose, they don't have anything to worry about because their conference, they're always going to be winning in the conference. So it's a little different for Big East. Obviously, the Big East can get 4, 5, 6 teams in, but it's always, you're not always going to be a 30 and one team when you play in the Big East. The Big East is just too good. So if you wanted, if we wanted to be like that, we could just change conferences and find a conference like that. But I think we're always going to be good. It's just our conference is way better.
So when I first saw that question, I didn't necessarily have that line of thought, but I love the fact that you thought about this. I love that you just have a different, train of thought than I do, because I was just thinking more of the lines of like the players that we attract, how do we cultivate that culture, and things of that nature, because I've always seen Gonzaga teams to be really tough teams who know exactly who they are come March. And that's why they're such a tough out in the March Madness, is because by that point, they're super experienced. They play together for a couple of years. And what they do is they just keep reloading. They'll have a really good senior class, but at the same time, they'll bring in some freshmen who just sort of kind of fit in. And then by the time those freshmen are sophomores and juniors, then they do it all over again. So that's kind of more of my line of thinking. But I guess you're right. West Coast Conference versus Big East, two very different animals.
It's no joke. But like what you're saying. Last year or 2 years ago, they for the last couple of years, it's kind of been a little different. They've kind of brought in some freshmen with firepower, and it's not necessarily the junior senior class, and then they kind of refilter. It's kind of been the freshman sophomores, and then they kind of leave, and then they have to find new guys. But yeah, that's them, and St. Mary's, I feel like, has kind of always been that way, where they kind of have those junior seniors, they reload and kind of just do it all over again.
But isn't that kind of like the landscape of NCAA basketball as a whole? Is we are seeing so much more of a push to getting young, talented guys.
For sure.
Class is the same thing, right?
Yeah, I wasn't meaning it to disagree with you. I was just saying the difference the last couple of years for them. So normally, they do the, junior, senior, then they graduate and then they reload. But the last couple of years, obviously, just the difference. So
the other thing that fans, if we are going to compare ourselves to a program like Gonzaga, which is not the first time I've heard this comparison, this is kind of a conversation that comes up anytime I have a chance to talk to fans about it. So I will say this, Coach Few has been at Gonzaga for what, 20, 30, whatever years? How long has he been there for? Like a really, really long time, really built that program from the ground up to
right.
finally get it to where it is nowadays. I'm sure if you asked him this question a decade into his tenure over there, he would have been like, I don't know if I'm going to be, a team that's going to be Final Four bound. Of course, every coach would want that to happen
Right.
for their program, but
Right.
it's a very difficult task to have done, right?
Right. No, especially when you look at it just based on the question that Omaha is better than Spokane and the facilities. So I mean, they do a great job, and they get players that fit their system, but also have talent to be NBA and professional players after. So I'm not discrediting anything that they've done. It's just every year the conference is a different animal than the Big East being the Big East.
So, wow, I have a question to ask you then. Do you think the Valley was tougher than the West Coast Conference as well? Or how do you feel about comparing those two? Because we were in the Valley before and we didn't quite reach those heights that Gonzaga did.
Right. I mean, you're catching me with, I was red shirt the last year in the Valley, so I didn't get to see. Yeah, I didn't get to see all of it, but I will say that the Wichita State teams were pretty damn good. So it wasn't like the Valley as a whole was just not good. But again, I'm not meaning to discredit them, but it kind of is what it is. Other than them, and not a whole lot of big names coming out.
Steve has another question, and this is one specifically for you, Isaiah. He says that you were one of the most resilient players that he's ever seen wear a Jays uniform. No injuries kept you down. You always made a comeback. Your attitude was always positive. What kept you motivated, and what advice would you give these young players as they face unexpected adversities?
Well, first, what I tell the young kids, I mean, adversity is always going to happen. It's just how you handle it and bounce back from it. It might, it comes in different shapes and forms, and it'll hit you at different times, but you just have to find a way to put your head down and get through it and get back to doing what you want to do and doing, playing basketball was my thing. So I knew that was what I wanted to do. That was my love. So every time I had an injury, it was focus on what I have to get back to, get back to playing, what I had to do. And that Mamba mentality of no one thinks I can come back. Well, show them that I can. And that was kind of my thing going through it is, nobody thinks I'll come back from, the knee injury. No one thinks I'll come back from it the second time. And then you just find a way.
It's a little eerie that we're having you on the podcast talking about the Xavier game. And I just now remembering that was the first time that my heart was broken when I saw you go down. I think it was a dislocated kneecap right? That was the very first time.
Yeah.
And then obviously we have the labrum issues further down your career, more knee issues and stuff like that. You just mentioned about like, oh, nobody thinks I could come back. I'm about to prove everybody wrong. But on those dog days of rehab, like, did you ever think to yourself, like, man, like this might be a little bit even too much even for me?
There's always, everybody goes through it with injuries. It's, you got a bunch of people who first off, you got to have people around you that care and that have your back. And that was, you and Mo always kept me, kept my head level so that I wasn't always, depressed or, thinking I couldn't come back. But everyone goes through those days where it's just rehab's awful, your body, whatever injury feels terrible. And you go back to your room and you just sit there and you just think like, wow, maybe I can't do it. And then, it kind of just, you go to bed, you wake up and it's like, okay, all right, I'm back. It's a new day. Just do it again. We'll get better.
So that's just more on the injury side of it, but there's a whole bunch of different things that could happen
Right.
that are more or less unexpected. Do you have any examples of some that you were just like, whoa, like I didn't see that coming, and it kind of affected you on a day-to-day basis, or maybe like your play and whatnot?
I mean, yeah, personal issues. They're like just I always tried to do, it's always tough, but I always tried to separate, personal life and things off the court so that when I stepped on the court, that was all I was thinking about is what, playing basketball, or if I was injured, it was getting to the training room, and then I'd focus on what I have to do to get back to playing. So I mean, yeah, there were a few things in personal life that were kind of affected, but I always tried to, and I felt like I did a pretty good job of keeping it separate. But I don't know like what to tell somebody about that, because I don't know. Everyone handles things differently. So
Right. Those are very good questions, Steve. We appreciate that. Another Steve Swanigan on Twitter, is asking, what do you think the peak is for this team this season? And he also wants to know a good practice story from either you or I, or maybe the both of us. So for this year's team, we've seen them have some ups, we've seen them have some downs, we've seen them beat Nebraska handily, we've seen them beat Nova handily at home, but we also see them lose a close game to Arizona State, which they should have won in my opinion. And we saw what Villanova did to them on the road in Philly, and then just this past example on the road at Cincinnati, or sorry, in Cincinnati at Xavier.
right.
So what is the peak for the boys in your honest opinion, Isaiah Zierden?
Peak. Like where it depends on, if we're just looking for like what it could be. Obviously any team can make a run. You got to get hot at the right time. But peak, I don't know.
Here, I'll put it into tiers for you. So right now, I need to look up the standings real quick, but I think that we are fourth or tied for fourth in the Big East with a 2-2 record, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. So first, I will ask you, where do you think they're going to end the regular season at ranked in the Big East?
I would think right around that 3, 4, 5 spot. I don't think that, obviously, Nova's always going to be right there for 1 and 2. But I don't think 3, 4, or 5. I don't think that's far fetched. I don't think that's like a crazy thought. That's
all right. So
me.
That's pretty good. Now, how about for Big East tournament? Do you think the boys have a chance to make a run at a championship?
Well, I mean, everyone always has a chance.
Everyone has a chance, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to sit there and just try to, squash the. You never know. Never know.
That's the thing about being asked these questions is, one, we're so biased. So that's the
right,
number one.
I'm not gonna
I know
we're going to finish ninth, and I think it's going to be trash.
Every single year when I do the ESPN like brackets or whatever, I have like 5 or 6 brackets where somehow, some way the boys go through it all and we're winning every championship. Like, you know what I mean? So we're super biased about this. But if I have to be realistic right now with where things are, Villanova is always going to be a strong team. We got to split against them. We just lost at Xavier. This team has a chance to be a top 3 team for sure. But now what we have to really be careful about is, like we talked about in the open, their turnovers, their lack of consistency, and how quickly they're going to be able to gel together and really, have a chance to come together, play the right way, understand what each and every single role is. Those are going to be the things that if they're able to put that all together, makes me think that they could easily be a top 3 seed. And they were projected to be number 8 in the conference. I had a conversation with Coach Mack in the summer about where he thought his team was going to be. He was pretty shocked when he went to the Big East Media Day that they were going to be number 8. So I know he's using that as bulletin board material every single day. But yeah, I think a top 3 team in the Big East will put this team way ahead of schedule, especially with the talent that they have coming back like next year if they decide to stick together, right?
Right. No, and any little bit of momentum and confidence building towards the end of this year, that just makes it better for the guys coming back and growing into next year. So again, any run that they can make at the end of the year is always a positive. So I don't know. That's why I was saying I don't know like what the peak is, because for you hope that you make a run and then no matter what it translates and carries over into next year with the guys who are coming back and because they're young guys that they can grow and mature and pick that up.
But to answer the questions more concretely, very biased opinion, we're winning it all. We're winning it all.
We're just making it a huge run and winning.
Oh, we're winning it all, boys. Let's go, boys. I'm rolling with you guys, yo. I'm putting all my chips in the middle of the table right here, right now. Most biased opinion in Field of 68 Media Network history. The Jays are winning it all. Something crazy or cool, funny that's happened in practice, Isaiah?
I'm gonna let you go first. I'm trying to think of,
My favorite practice of all time was, for whatever reason, we had to fly out early. I think we were trying to avoid like a snowstorm or something like that. So our practice was like at like 11:30, as opposed to it being like we have class all day, we practice and then we fly out, which is what a regular like road game situation would be like. And this was Will Artino. I'm throwing you under the bus, buddy. This was a practice where Will was not performing too well and the coaching staff was kind of getting on him. The main reason that he used as to why it wasn't working out was that his eggs weren't cooked well enough at the dining hall. So there you go. That's my practice story. And Will, Will, you're guest on the show. You have free range to come back on the show and defend yourself whenever you want, bro. Come back and explain that story. But that's what I remember from that.
I don't know why everyone makes that of it. What, they weren't cooked. I don't.
If the eggs were cooked, how can you expect him to practice well, dude? That's his first meal of the day. That's the most important meal of the day.
That is the most important.
So that's my practice story that I got.
I just, I don't know whether or not to.
Are you scared to call somebody out, Isaiah?
No, it would have been us. That's my thing. I wouldn't have called anyone out. It would have just been us. Me, you, and Mo. There was.
I could think of a couple of practices when I looked over at you and you were gassed.
The story of practice that I'm thinking of is, we had a decent night and they found out. And so we were running the next day and I looked over to my left and Mo's just gassed up against the wall. And this is an old gym. And I looked to my right and you go, oh, I'm still drunk. As we're 20 minutes into running, I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, man.
We're all just getting ready to yak.
That's the one thing, though. That's the one thing that I do remember is like, no matter what, if like sprints or whatever was the quote unquote punishment, or, sometimes like, especially early into the season, it's just a matter of trying to get the boys back in shape. So like those ones I fully understand or whatever. But the one thing that I always told myself is that they're never going to see me bow out because of a running exercise. Like, no, I refuse to be the guy to run over to the trash can. I refuse to be the guy to show fatigue even. So like, I remember like after sprints, I was just standing upright Like just
Oh,
trying to show everybody that I'm still ready to
I'll
go.
show you I'm dead. I'll have my hands on my knees, but then I'll get up and do it again. I'm not gonna tap out and
Yeah.
run to the trash can. But that was one of those preseason practices that we had, and that was the first one that came to mind. That was just the funniest.
So there it is, Steve Swanigan. I appreciate the question. We have Sam Norland, and he's asking you, Isaiah, specifically, what's your most memorable shot hit that you hit while in a Jays uniform?
Probably the Oklahoma one at home. I think
That was big. That was a big time game. I remember staying up in Romania. That was my first time playing pro. First time that was when I decided, hey, I'm staying up to watch these games. I don't care what time of night it is, but 4:30 a.m. sign me up.
That was probably the one, just because it was such a great game, and for us to be able to come back against a ranked team like that during that year, that's probably the one for me.
Sam's got a second question, but it's so ridiculous. I kind of don't even want to ask it. But since I bigged it up, I need to do so. The second question he asked is, could you guys have beat Jordan's Bulls in a CenturyLink during the 2013-2014 season? We did go undefeated at home that year. So maybe that's where he's kind of going with that. But
is Jordan playing, or is he out, or are they all out?
I would assume in this crazy hypothetical, they're all playing.
Out? Is Scotty out?
Does that mean I'd have to defend Jordan, or would it be Grant Gibbs doing that? Oh.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think we could throw all 15 of us at him, and I don't think it's going to matter. he would be so upset, like the disrespect,
the audacity,
right?
That we're on the court with him.
You think that you could even be in the question, and then you just go off for 90 points and be like, all right, well, we tried.
Yeah. This guy, you're talking 96 Bulls versus 2013, 2014 Jays at CenturyLink. Like, I mean, come on. That's such a ridiculous. I shouldn't even have brought it up.
No, it was just, I mean, he's the GOAT. It's not even a question.
I shouldn't even have brought it up, to be honest. That it was a little bit of a waste of time to bring up that second question. But Sam, we appreciate you, brother. Keep listening. I appreciate the question for sure. We talked about it a little bit with some of the Twitter questions, Isaiah, but I definitely have to talk about this a little bit more with you, since this happened so much in your career. There were so many ups and downs, obviously mainly due to injuries. But aside from that being a factor in your Creighton career, is there anything that you have, like, maybe as a regret, maybe that something you want to go back and change if you had a chance to?
Honestly, I mean, just those days when, I'd do half practice, maybe doing a whole practice, knowing that it was going to end, in a few years. But again, just the injuries, I just knew, physically what I could and couldn't do. But otherwise, no, I wouldn't go back and change anything. I feel like I left everything I could out there. So
no regrets. Hell yeah. That's exactly how I feel. One thing that I know you do regret, though, do you remember the summer after you and I both graduated? We were living together because we were both training, still playing pro. We used to wake up in the morning. You were my training partner. I was your training partner. So we push each other in the weight room. We push each other on the floor, different shooting competitions. But you know where I'm going at, where we really, really, really competed. FIFA and NHL. PlayStation.
Well, hang on now. We can't even. That's not even the second part. Doesn't even count. You made it such an ugly game. It's such a beautiful game. NHL. It's just, you made it so ugly. It doesn't even count.
Let the record show that I still have that scoreboard somewhere in my basement, and it's not looking too pretty for you.
Well, it is a great thing that we keep tallies going. It
Yeah.
never ends, but we're, NHL, we're just scratching that off. It was so gross. It was,
Oh, what do you mean? It's such a beautiful game. Get into the
we're
zone,
not,
shoot as often as you
I don't,
possibly can,
I don't even,
pepper
I
the
don't even,
goalie. What do you
I
mean?
don't know enough about hockey to be able to give it the respect. I just know that you were disrespecting the
Look,
game the way that you were just shooting shots. It was gross.
listen. This is what you get for wanting to play a Canadian in hockey. Like this is just simply what you get. I'm sorry, Isaiah, but you just have to learn your
It
lessons.
wasn't.
You have
That's
to go
not.
through your
That
lumps.
wasn't hockey. I'm from the land of hockey. That wasn't hockey. We got 10,000 lakes, and I've never seen hockey played that way on any of them.
Bro, it's all about getting to the offensive zone, dumping the puck in, chasing it against the boards,
No, 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 no. You
swinging
weren't
it back to your
dumping the
point,
puck in.
get a
You
screen on the
You
goalie.
weren't dumping the puck in. You were shooting from the other blue line and then chasing. That's not dumping it in.
It's a dumping chase,
difference.
Isaiah Zierden. See,
Huge difference.
this is why people tune into this podcast is to hear this beautiful hockey talk that
I think
we're giving them right now.
be disgusted. Oh, speaking of that, FIFA, your Arsenal is making a decent run this year now. I know you probably
Look,
don't even pay attention because you don't care.
no,
But
I refuse. No, I care so much that I refuse. I'm not like Cowboys fans, I'm not obnoxious
no,
about my
but I'm
my
being honest.
fandom.
You guys moved back up into fifth. You're only 3 points out of fourth, and hey, as
See?
long as you guys beat Man U, I could care less what your record is.
So this is when I know you're trolling me because when you say something along the lines of you guys are moving up to fifth, I know the answer is here.
No,
I know who you are.
Okay, sincere. You guys are in fifth. Sincere. Now you're not second, like we are,
They're
but
like
you're
Liverpool,
moving up.
yeah.
You're moving up.
Well then, if you want to go there, let's talk about, I guess, you and I's Minnesota Vikings and Indianapolis Colts. Because
It's trash. At least you guys have a chance.
what chance? How we have a chance when we lose to the 2-14 Jaguars? What chance is that?
Well, you had a chance. You could have won, and then you
trash.
could have had a chance to play.
For those of you who happen to see my Instagram story, that is truly how I felt that day. I had my jersey on the whole day, anticipating it's such a great win. The announcement that we're going to make the playoffs again. By the second half, that jersey was off of my body, thrown onto the hardwood in my apartment. Bro, I was so sad.
But at least you got to the excitement of the possibility to keep playing, and that game. Our season was already done. No,
by week 11.
Yeah, well. We knew going into the year it wasn't a good one, but
oh man, Isaiah, bro.
Every year with being a Vikings fan, everyone gets your hopes up, and then they just kick you in the nuts, and you're like, all right, well, back to being a fan.
Just gotta deal with it, I guess. Baby bro, I appreciate you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to step back into the J with me. Bro, we need to do this more often because it's just too much jokes. Like I said, I apologize to the people who are listening to this podcast today. There's just so much laughter. I don't know if you guys are getting much information out of this, but we had to do it to them.
Well, if you get nothing out of it other than we wouldn't beat the 95, 96 Bulls, that's all you need to take out of it.
There it is. Silver lining. We would not be Jordan's best team. Wow. Shocker. Anything else that you need to say to the Blue Jay fans before we sign out?
I appreciate you having me on, and go Jays.
As always, go Jays. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Field 68 Media Network. Like I always say, I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the questions. You guys have been awesome. If you guys keep enjoying what I have to say, I promise you I'll keep talking. I say that each and every podcast. So this was Isaiah Zierden, our 13th guest of season number 2. I'm Jahenns Manigat, your host of the Welcome to the J podcast. And as always, stay safe and go Jays.